The night had a weight to it, thick and impenetrable, as though the darkness itself held its breath. Talara moved silently through the ruins of what had once been a thriving industrial district. The air reeked of rust and decayed wood, the remnants of humanity's ambitions long abandoned to nature's slow reclamation. Her boots crunched on shards of glass, the only sound in the oppressive silence. Yet, she knew she wasn't alone. Her sensory matrix pulsed faintly beneath her skin, detecting the faint warmth of human life somewhere ahead. The ancient structures around her loomed like the skeletons of a forgotten world, their twisted metal ribs framing a sky of pinprick stars. The buildings whispered their history in the language of corrosion and collapse, and Talara listened, her sharp mind cataloging every detail. This planet, Earth, was her newest assignment, a speck of life amidst the vast void her people sought to reclaim. For centuries, she had been the spearhead of their survival, an immortal warrior tasked with carving a path for the fleet. Yet something about this world gnawed at her resolve, an unspoken strangeness she couldn't yet define. She paused at the edge of a cracked pavement, her gaze drawn to a distant glow. A single light burned defiantly in the upper story of an otherwise darkened building. Talara's enhanced vision zoomed in, her pupils narrowing to slits as she focused on the solitary figure behind the window. A man sat hunched over a canvas, his silhouette illuminated by the erratic flicker of a dying bulb. His hand moved feverishly, wielding a brush that danced across the surface, its strokes imbued with purpose and desperation. She couldn't see the painting itself, but the energy emanating from his movements was palpable, almost magnetic. Talara tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. She had witnessed countless acts of creation over her endless existence, monuments raised to forgotten gods, machines that defied the stars, cities consumed by their own ambition. Yet this felt different, intimate, fragile. Her thoughts were interrupted by a faint hum vibrating through her senses. It wasn't human. Talara stiffened, her hand brushing instinctively against the hilt of the blade concealed beneath her coat. The hum grew louder, resonating through the air like the distant heartbeat of a dying star. She slipped into the shadows, her form melding seamlessly with the darkness. A small probe drifted into view, its spherical body gleaming with an otherworldly light. It moved with purpose, scanning the environment with cold precision. Talara's jaw tightened. The fleet was watching. The probe hovered for a moment, its sensors sweeping over the building. Talara calculated its trajectory and moved swiftly, her steps silent as falling leaves. She couldn't risk being detected. Not yet. Not while she was still piecing together the puzzle that was Earth. Reaching a hidden alcove, she crouched and extended her hand, a small device sliding from beneath her sleeve. With a flick of her fingers, she sent a pulse of energy toward the probe. It shuddered, its lights flickering erratically before it fell lifelessly to the ground. Talara exhaled slowly, her grip on the device tightening. Disabling the probe would buy her time, but it also meant drawing suspicion. Her people were relentless, their surveillance unyielding. She could feel the weight of their expectations pressing against her mind, a constant reminder of her purpose. But what was her purpose now? Her gaze shifted back to the window. The man was still painting, oblivious to the danger that had just passed. Talara studied him, her thoughts churning. What was it about this planet that made her hesitate? She had raised entire civilizations without a second thought, yet here she was, lingering in the shadows, captivated by the simple act of creation. The faint cry of a child broke the silence, echoing through the empty streets. Talara's head snapped toward the sound, her senses sharpening. It came from somewhere nearby, a fragile voice cutting through the void. Without thinking, she moved toward it, her steps quickening. She found the source in a narrow alleyway. A child, no older than 6, sat curled against the cold brick wall, their thin frame shivering beneath a tattered blanket. Their wide eyes met Talara's, filled with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. Talara hesitated. She had seen countless lives extinguished without a flicker of emotion, yet this child's gaze held her in place. There was something achingly raw about their vulnerability, a stark contrast to the brutal efficiency of her own existence. Before she could act, the sound of approaching footsteps reached her ears. A group of humans emerged from the darkness, their faces lined with concern. They surrounded the child, their voices low and soothing. One of them, a woman with weathered features, scooped the child into her arms, wrapping them in a thick coat. Talara stepped back into the shadows, watching silently. The group moved with purpose, their bond evident in the way they supported one another. She felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name, an unfamiliar warmth that stirred unbidden within her. As they disappeared into the night, Talara remained rooted to the spot, her mind racing. Humanity was far more complicated than she had anticipated. They were fragile, yes, but also fiercely connected in ways that defied her understanding. For the first time in centuries, she felt uncertain. The light in the distant window flickered out, leaving her alone in the dark. Talara stood motionless, the night pressing in around her. The mysteries of Earth stretched before her, vast and unknowable, and for the first time, she felt the faint stirrings of a question she didn't yet know how to answer. What if this world was worth saving? The city stretched beneath Talara, like a living organism, thick with veins of light, blood that pulsed through cracked streets and hollowed-out buildings. From her vantage point atop a skeletal tower, she could see the contours of the human world in a way that both captivated and unsettled her. Lights flickered in homes, flickering like stars, fragile, temporary, but stubborn. There was something about Earth that made her question everything. She had encountered the human child and their protectors in the alley, a scene so ordinary, yet so profound. The woman's hand against the child's cheek, the tenderness in the older man's gaze as he nodded to the others, telling them to keep moving. They hadn't known who she was, and yet they had saved that child without a second thought. Their actions, so simple, so human, were unlike anything she had ever witnessed. A flash of heat filled her chest, unexpected and unwelcome. A warrior of her kind should feel nothing at all for such fleeting things. Yet, here she was, entangled in a world she had not expected to stir her so deeply. But her mission was clear. Earth's fate was sealed. She had been sent here as the vanguard of a galactic cleansing, a force of destruction to make way for her people's survival. No hesitation, no mercy. Her eyes flicked to the small device in her hand. It hummed softly, the pulse she had sent earlier to disable the probe now drifting toward oblivion. The fleet by now would have detected the disturbance. Her actions were being tracked. Soon the commanders would demand answers. She moved swiftly through the darkened streets, her senses stretched thin as she calibrated her next steps. The city's heartbeat in time with her own. Erratic, unpredictable. Humanity, in all its flaws, had a vitality that was both irksome and fascinating. At the intersection of two crumbling roads, she paused. Her neural network buzzed in the back of her mind, an alert. Her mission was not just to observe Earth, but to destroy it, to eliminate the threat that humanity posed to her people. And yet, as her mind replayed the memory of the child's frightened eyes and the woman's resolve, a gnawing sense of confusion coiled within her. She needed answers. Talara's gaze drifted over the alleyways, watching as a small group of humans huddled in the shadows, their faces lined with weariness and suspicion. They were whispering amongst themselves, casting furtive glances toward her position. She hadn't expected to be noticed, but she had underestimated the resourcefulness of these creatures. They were more aware than she'd anticipated. With a flash of movement, one of them broke off from the group. A man, tall and thin, his features drawn with exhaustion. He was heading straight toward her. Talara's hand rested against her blade, the cold metal a reminder of the mission. But her instincts screamed at her. This wasn't the moment to strike. This was not an enemy. She remained motionless, blending into the night as the man approached, his eyes scanning the street. There was an intensity to his gaze, a sharpness that suggested he knew the city as well as she did. He paused beneath the faint glow of a flickering street lamp and turned, his gaze locking with hers for just a heartbeat. Then he continued walking, unfazed by the encounter. Tahlara exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her muscles. She hadn't been detected, but his calm dismissal unsettled her. How had he sensed her presence? What was it about these humans that made them so different from the worlds she had conquered before? Her thoughts were interrupted by a series of rapid, muffled footsteps. Closer now. A woman moving fast, her face a mask of determination. She spotted Talara's silhouette almost immediately, her steps slowing as she took in the figure before her. "You're not from around here," the woman said, her voice low but sharp. She spoke in the clipped tones of someone used to confrontation. "You've been following us. What do you want?" Talara stood silent, gauging the situation. She had anticipated these kinds of encounters, but there was something in the woman's eyes, a quiet defiance, tempered by a wariness that spoke of too many nights spent hiding from threats. Talara's presence had been noticed. Her cover was slipping. "I'm not here to harm you," Talara replied, her voice a soft blend of warmth and authority. "I mean no danger." The woman didn't seem convinced, her eyes narrowing as she took another step forward, closing the distance between them. The city's undercurrent of danger hummed louder now, the tension in the air thick with the weight of suspicion. No one in this city believes that. Not anymore. Before Talara could respond, the woman's hand shot out, her fingers brushing the sleeve of Talara's coat. For a moment, it felt as though the world paused, a fleeting second where the woman's touch seemed to cut through the murk of Talara's mission. Then, the woman jerked her hand back, a sudden awareness flashing across her face. "You're one of them," she whispered, her voice full of cold certainty. Talara felt a jolt, something colder than fear pulsing through her veins. The woman knew, or at least she suspected. Her heart raced. She had underestimated how far her actions had rippled into the fabric of human society. Before she could answer, the man she had seen earlier stepped forward from the shadows. His face was pale, lips thin with barely concealed anger. He drew something from his coat, an old jagged knife, and held it loosely in his hand. Not in a way that suggested immediate danger, but enough to show that they were not alone in their suspicion. The woman's gaze flicked between them, calculating. Talara's mind raced. She had no intention of harming them, yet the stakes were rising. If she revealed herself, the humans would turn on her, and all pretense of secrecy would shatter. But if she continued to evade them, her mission would be jeopardized. The probe had already alerted her fleet to her presence. "Who are you?" the woman demanded again, her voice colder now. "And why are you following us?" Talara considered her answer. For a moment, she wondered if the woman would believe the truth. But the truth was a luxury she could not afford. "I'm not your enemy," she said again, her voice steady, though the words felt thin on her tongue. But the woman wasn't listening anymore. Her eyes flicked to the man with the knife, a silent command, and with that, they both took a step back, preparing for something more. The city was alive with secrets, and Talara was at its heart, caught between a mission she could no longer ignore and a world that demanded answers she didn't yet have. The threads of her plan were fraying. The streets had grown quiet once more, a tension hanging in the air like the calm before a storm. Talara stood in the alley, her hand still lightly grazing the hilt of her blade. Her senses stretched tight as the two humans stared at her, suspicion woven into their every movement. The man's grip on his knife tightened slightly, and the woman's stance remained poised, ready for anything. The seconds stretched like threads between them, taut and fragile. "Who are you?" The woman's voice was softer now, the coldness replaced by something almost wary, as though she could sense that there was more to Talara than met the eye. Talara remained motionless, her mind working at full capacity. The truth, the real truth, was something she could not share. Her mission was clear, etched into her being. Annihilate Earth. Nothing more, nothing less. Humanity was a dying species, an obstacle that stood in the way of her own people's survival. But in the face of these two humans, she felt a gnawing dissonance, an unfamiliar impulse. "I've told you already," Talara began, her voice low but unyielding. "I mean you no harm." The man sneered, his knife held loosely in his hand now, the blade catching the faint glow of the broken street lamp. "You'll forgive me if I don't believe you." Talara was beginning to realize that time had run out for diplomacy. The longer she stood here, the more likely it was that they would raise the alarm. Her presence was no longer a secret, and the humans would soon realize that they weren't dealing with just another passerby. The sudden flare of energy in her chest warned her. The pulse of the fleet was closer now, almost tangible. The cleansing force would arrive within days, and she would have to make a decision: destroy Earth as ordered, or betray her people for something she didn't yet understand. A flicker of movement behind her caught her attention. Another human, but this one was different. He was young, his face darkened by the grime of the city's forgotten corners. He didn't carry the sharp suspicion that the others did. In fact, his expression seemed almost expectant, as though he'd been waiting for something. For her. His eyes, too, were sharp, piercing in a way that suggested an awareness beyond the ordinary. Without a word, he stepped forward, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. The woman and the man both stiffened, momentarily distracted, their attention shifting toward him. It was enough. Talara moved faster than they could react, her body flowing like liquid through the air. Her hand closed around the man's wrist, twisting sharply, forcing the knife from his hand before he could strike. In the same fluid motion, she stepped between them, facing the newcomer with the same cold precision she'd honed over centuries of battle. He didn't flinch. "You're one of them," the young man said, his voice calm, but there was no fear in his eyes, only a knowing that unsettled Talara to her core. "I thought so." Talara's jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" Her voice was clipped, her mind already calculating her next move. Every instinct screamed that this moment was crucial. The human's reaction would determine her course. "The fleet," the young man replied, his gaze unwavering. "You've been sent to destroy us." He spoke the words with such certainty that it took Talara a moment to process. "But I don't think you'll do it." Talara felt a shiver, though she didn't show it. The words cut through her like a blade to the chest. She knew the truth of her mission, but hearing it from him, he who was so impossibly close to the heart of this world, felt like a jolt to her very being. She could feel the universe pressing against her, as though it had bent to listen to this moment, to this choice. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharper now. She stepped closer, scrutinizing him, trying to pierce the layers of his strange calm, but he didn't flinch. "I'm someone who's been watching," he said. "You're not the first of your kind to come to Earth. There have been others before you. Some of them failed, some of them succeeded." He paused, letting his words sink in. But none of them questioned why they were here. None of them thought that maybe, just maybe, we don't deserve to die. The words hung heavy in the air, like the weight of 1,000 fallen stars. Talara could feel them pressing against her, demanding her attention, her understanding. She opened her mouth to respond, to assert her place in the universe, but the young man continued, his voice unwavering. "There's something else you need to know. Something you haven't been told." He moved a step closer, his gaze cutting through her as if he could see the vast expanse of her soul. "The fleet. They're not just coming for Earth. They're coming for everything." The statement sent a shockwave through her mind. Everything. She had been trained to believe that Earth was an isolated battleground, another planet to be cleansed so that her people might thrive. But the young man's words rattled her in a way she hadn't expected. "What do you mean?" Talara demanded. She felt the walls of her thoughts closing in, her certainty unspooling like a thread unraveling. "You think your people are just here for Earth," the young man said, "but they've been cleansing planets for centuries. They've been wiping out entire species, civilizations, galaxies. They don't just take out threats, they burn worlds to fuel their own survival. Earth was never just a target, it's one of many. Talara took a step back, her mind reeling. The weight of his words felt like a brick being laid upon her chest, each syllable a reminder that she might have been wrong. Could she have been wrong? She had always believed that she was fighting for the survival of her species, that the fleet's endless conquests were justified. But this was a revelation she had never anticipated. It was a truth that shook the foundation of everything she had ever known. The woman who had stood at her side all this time, the one who had seen through her deception, finally spoke, her voice low but fierce. "You'll need to decide then." Her gaze met Talara's, the weight of her words sinking in. "What are you really fighting for? Your people's survival, or something greater?" Talara's heart stilled, her breath catching in her throat. For the first time in her endless life, she was faced with a choice that did not come with a clear answer. The truth of her mission, the truth of her species, had been shattered. The fleet was coming, and with it, a reckoning that would not just decide Earth's fate, but her own. She stood there, frozen in the silence that followed, the weight of 1,000 years of conquest pressing on her shoulders. And for the first time, the question rang clear in her mind. Was her mission worth the destruction of everything? Of everyone? Talara's thoughts churned like a violent storm, the winds of doubt whipping through the fabric of her mind. She stood at the edge of the alley, the sound of distant city life humming faintly in the background, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The young man's words echoed in her head, repeating in a relentless loop. The fleet is coming for everything. Her chest tightened with a sensation she could not name. Fear? Regret? Number. It was something deeper. A sense of betrayal, perhaps. All her life, she had been taught that the destruction of lesser worlds was the only path to survival for her people. But now, in the dark recesses of this strange world, those teachings felt hollow, twisted, and her purpose, the singular mission she had lived for, felt more like a chain, dragging her toward a precipice she could no longer ignore. The woman and the man were watching her, waiting for a response, though Talara couldn't bring herself to answer. She could feel the weight of their gaze, an unspoken challenge hanging between them. They had seen through her facade, peeled back the layers of deception she had so carefully crafted. But now, it was her turn to look beyond their faces, to search for the truth in the words they had spoken. "You're wrong," she said, though the words felt strange in her mouth. She wasn't sure if she was convincing them or herself. "My people, they would never destroy everything, not like you're suggesting." The young man, who had revealed far more about her than she had about him, tilted his head, his eyes studying her with a quiet intensity. His calm seemed to pierce the air, cutting through her rising turmoil. "You don't know them like I do," he said softly, almost as if he were speaking to a wounded animal rather than a warrior. "The truth of the fleet, of your people, is a lie you've been told, and it's the same lie you've told yourself, for the sake of survival, but not everything needs to burn for that." Talara recoiled from the words, her pulse quickening, her fingers curling into fists. He didn't understand. How could he? This was not a moral debate for her. This was survival, something the humans could scarcely comprehend. She turned, walking away from them, needing space to think, to quiet the noise in her head. Every step felt like a weight, dragging her down the narrow alley. The sharp edges of the city's broken buildings rose around her, like jagged teeth, reminding her of the mission she was on. The fleet was coming, soon. The cleansing was inevitable. The orders had been clear, and yet now they seemed to lose their edge. She had been the harbinger of death for so long, it had become second nature. No hesitation, no questioning. But what if she had been wrong? The young man's words clung to her thoughts like a persistent ache. They're not coming for Earth. They're coming for everything. His words had shattered the simple clarity of her mission. She had always seen herself as an instrument of fate, a necessary tool of destruction. But now the lines were blurring, the path she had walked for centuries no longer certain. How had she never seen the broader picture? How had she not realized that the fleet wasn't just a force of necessity, but of conquest? Tahlara paused in the shadows, her gaze lifting toward the skyline where the dim outlines of the fleet's arrival were already forming. She could feel the hum of the fleet's engines in the back of her mind, the approaching storm. They were close now, too close, and when they arrived, it would be over. But what if she made a different choice? Her heart ached at the thought, and she turned to face the woman and the man again, her decision solidifying in her chest. "I've been wrong," Tahlara said quietly, her voice barely a whisper, the words feeling like a foreign language on her tongue. "I don't know what your people think of mine, but I know now that I cannot follow them." The woman, whose eyes had been narrowed in suspicion, softened slightly, though the mistrust still lingered in her gaze. "What are you going to do then?" Talara's gaze shifted between them both, the weight of their silent question pressing heavily on her chest. She stepped forward, her movements deliberate and careful. "Help you," she said, the words more certain now. "Help you stop the fleet." A ripple of disbelief passed through the group, as if they were unsure whether to believe her or simply let her pass as another phantom of this crumbling city. The young man's expression remained unreadable, but the woman, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. She knew the gravity of Talara's statement. To side with them now was to break every rule she had ever known. Talara had never been the one to question orders. She had followed them unflinchingly, consumed by the singular purpose of her mission. But now, here, on this shattered world, she had reached a crossroads. One path would lead to her continued compliance, to the destruction of everything she had once believed was justified. But the other was a leap into the unknown, a leap that would require everything she had ever known to be abandoned. "I don't trust you," the woman said, her voice steady, her gaze sharp, "but I'm willing to listen, for now." Talara nodded, acknowledging the fragile alliance they had formed in this moment. It was a start, nothing more, but it was enough. For the first time in her long existence, the future seemed uncertain, both thrilling and terrifying. She turned, leading them through the darkened streets toward the only place that could offer a chance of stopping the fleet. The underground network, the resistance that had been fighting the forces she once served. The path ahead was fraught with danger. She knew that, but the weight of her decision was already settling in her chest, a burden she would carry until the end. As they moved deeper into the city, the shadows of her past began to fade. The once clear lines between enemy and ally were blurring, and Talara could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. Every step she took toward the resistance, every inch closer to confronting the fleet, felt like a sacrifice. She was abandoning the only truth she had ever known. The wind picked up, carrying with it a bitter chill. The streets were empty now, as though even the city itself had retreated into the darkness in anticipation of what was to come. They passed under flickering lights, casting long, distorted shadows across cracked walls. She was already prepared to face what lay ahead, but there was something else rising within her, something she had never known, a sense of purpose that had long been buried beneath her unwavering duty. The storm was coming, but she was no longer certain which side of it she was on. The horizon was a canvas of fire. Talara stood at the edge of the Resistance's fortified base, the distant glow of the fleet's approach painting the night sky with a hellish hue. The stars were fading one by one as the ships arrived, silent behemoths cutting through the dark like knives through the skin of the universe. She could feel the weight of their power, the promise of annihilation that had once been hers to carry. But now it was something else, something she could no longer bear to be a part of. Behind her, the remnants of humanity's last hope were gathering. The resistance fighters, bruised, weary, but defiant, moved like shadows through the wreckage of their fallen city. They spoke in hushed tones, eyes flicking nervously to the horizon. Tahlara could hear the beating of their hearts, the fear that was so palpable it seemed to seep from the ground itself. But there was something else, too. Hope. It was a flickering, fragile thing, but it was there, growing stronger with each passing moment. She had seen it in their eyes, in their actions. These people, these fragile humans, had something her own species had long since lost, a belief in the possibility of change, a belief that even in the face of destruction, there was still room for a future. For the first time in centuries, Tahlara felt a spark of something she had forgotten. It wasn't the cold certainty of conquest, but the warmth of something far more elusive. Purpose. "They're close," the woman said, her voice low, tinged with both fear and resolve. She was standing at Talara's side, her fingers gripping the edge of a weapon she had no experience with. Her knuckles were white, but there was a fire in her eyes. "What do we do now?" Talara didn't look at her. Instead, her gaze remained fixed on the approaching fleet. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her like the sky itself was collapsing, closing in around her. The resistance had done all they could, gathering weapons, fortifying the base, preparing for the worst. But Tahlara knew that this was no ordinary battle. This was the culmination of everything she had lived for, everything she had known. Her mission was simple: to destroy. But that was before she had seen the humanity in these people, before she had witnessed the strength in their resolve, the quiet courage that pulsed through their veins like electricity. "They're coming for us," Talara said, her voice firm but tinged with something that almost resembled emotion. She turned to the group behind her, the ragtag assortment of humans and aliens who had chosen to stand together. "But they will not have us, not without a fight." There was no bravado in her words, no empty promise. She spoke with the weight of someone who had faced death before and knew it well. Yet, for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone. The young man from before, who had led them into this alliance, stepped forward, his expression grim. His eyes were tired, but there was a determination in them that burned brighter than any star. "We're ready," he said simply, his voice unwavering. "But we need you to fight with us. You're the only one who knows how to face them." Talara nodded, her eyes shifting back to the horizon, where the first of the fleet's ships began to break through the atmosphere, their massive forms eclipsing the stars. She could feel them, their presence, their coldness. They were coming to reclaim what was theirs, to burn this world to ash. And yet, there was something in her that refused to let them win. She turned away from the horizon, locking eyes with the woman. "We don't have much time. I'll fight by your side, but you need to trust me." The woman nodded, though doubt still lingered in her gaze. She didn't know if she could trust Talara fully. No one could, not after everything that had happened, but they had no choice. Their fate was sealed, and Talara was the only chance they had left. As the fleet loomed closer, a rumble of distant thunder shaking the earth beneath them, Talara felt a rush of adrenaline. This was no longer a battle of species, of warriors and civilians. This was a battle for the soul of the universe itself. The enemy ships began to descend, massive and terrifying, their black hulls absorbing the faint light of the dying stars. They were like giant sentient things, consuming everything in their path. Talara could hear their engines now, the whine of them cutting through the air, and she stepped forward, her every instinct telling her to prepare for the inevitable. But there was no hesitation in her movement. She was no longer bound by her orders. She was no longer the vanguard of a dying species. She was something else, something human perhaps. A figure appeared from the shadows, another resistance fighter, her face hidden beneath a mask, her body armored and ready. She saluted Talara, her gaze filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "We have one shot," she said, her voice low but determined. "Once they land, we won't have time to make another move." Talara's gaze sharpened. The battle would be brutal, and she knew that the chances of survival were slim, but it didn't matter. Not anymore. She looked at the group of humans around her, their faces filled with a blend of fear and resolve. They were ready. And for the first time in her existence, Tahlara realized she was ready too. The fleet touched down, and the ground trembled beneath them. The first wave of soldiers began to pour from the ships, towering figures, their armored forms like shadows moving with deadly precision. The humans raised their weapons, but it was clear that they were outmatched. But Tahlara did not falter. With a warrior's precision, she moved into the fray, her blade flashing through the air, cutting through the first line of invaders with ease. She felt the power surge through her, her ancient training coming alive with a force she had long since forgotten. Each strike, each movement, was swift and deadly. The resistance fighters, bolstered by her presence, fought with renewed vigor. For the first time, Tahlara was fighting for something other than survival. She was fighting for hope. And in that fight, she discovered the most human part of herself, the part that could sacrifice everything for a future she could no longer ignore. The battle raged on, the sky above them burning with the light of explosions, the sound of gunfire and clashing metal ringing in their ears. But as the final ship fell from the sky, as the last of the invaders were driven back, Tahlara stood tall, her sword still gleaming, her heart pounding with a strange newfound rhythm. The fleet was gone, and for the first time in her life, Tahlara knew what it felt like to be free. The humans gathered around her, their faces marked with exhaustion, but their eyes alight with something else: gratitude, awe, and a lingering sense of wonder. They had won, together. As Tahlara gazed at the ruins of the battlefield, the sun finally began to rise over the horizon, casting its first light over a world that had been spared, not by fate, but by the courage of those who had chosen to fight for it. Tahlara knew in that moment that her journey was far from over, but the path ahead was no longer one of destruction. It was one of redemption, of growth, of learning to embrace the possibility of change. And for the first time, she felt the weight of her endless existence lift. The world was theirs, and so was she. Lyra stood on the observation deck of her vessel, the Arcosine, encased in a cocoon of seamless silver walls that pulsed faintly with Nithari bioluminal energy. The room was quiet, but alive, responding subtly to her presence, the air humming in tones only her advanced hearing could discern. Below her, suspended in the void like a rare gem, was Earth, a small, unassuming planet at the edge of a galactic quadrant often bypassed in Nithari travel logs. She tilted her head, the soft curve of her hair, almost translucent in the dim light, catching the faint rhythmic pulses of the ship's walls. Her expression was inscrutable, her thoughts obscured even from the ship's intelligence that monitored her vitals in real time. From this distance, the planet was a swirl of blues, whites, and greens, a mirage of serenity. Lyra had studied Earth's galactic profile before her arrival, a primitive Class 4 civilization, limited by its reliance on combustion and rudimentary technologies. Its inhabitants, despite their sentience, were marked by destructive tendencies and fractured social structures. Yet now, standing on the precipice of observation, something about the planet unsettled her. Her mandate was clear: observe, evaluate, and report. Simple enough. But as the ship's bioanalytical systems pulled streams of information from the planet's surface, unshielded signals, chaotic transmissions, fragmented languages, Lyra found herself drawn to something she couldn't quite define: a presence, an anomaly in the patterns, as though the planet itself whispered secrets just beyond her comprehension. "Status, Lyra," the ship's voice murmured, soft and genderless, designed to be unobtrusive. She did not immediately answer, her violet eyes narrowing as she studied the holographic display hovering before her. The display showed a scatter of human communications, an incomprehensible chaos of images, voices, and music. One stood out: a slow, mournful melody played on an instrument she could not name. It was a transmission from a remote Earth region, an analog recording overlaid with the static of decay. She tilted her head. "Have you identified the source?" she finally asked. An open channel originating from the southern hemisphere, a region marked by moderate conflict and economic instability. Likely insignificant, the ship responded. Lyra frowned. The melody had a haunting quality, weaving itself into her thoughts like a thread of light. Insignificant? Perhaps. But as a Nithari, she trusted intuition as much as analysis, a lesson honed by centuries of study and missions across dozens of worlds. She dismissed the thought for now, turning her attention to the ship's descent protocols. "Prepare for surface entry," she instructed. "Coordinates?" Lyra hesitated. The Nithari were known for their meticulous planning, yet she found herself drawn to unpredictability. "Randomize," she said. The ship paused as though questioning her decision, then acquiesced. "Randomizing coordinates, preparing descent." As the Arcosine began its silent descent toward the planet, the observation deck shifted. The smooth walls dimmed, and the floor beneath Lyra's feet vibrated with the energy of atmospheric entry. Her fingers brushed the edge of the console, her touch sparking a brief glow as she synchronized with the ship's sensory systems. For a moment, she saw Earth as it did, not through human eyes, but as a web of energies, patterns, and connections. Something pulsed faintly at the edge of her perception, a distortion in the otherwise harmonious rhythm of the planet's energy. It was faint, but unmistakable, a presence that did not belong. The landing was imperceptible to the human eye. The Arcosine nestled itself within a dense forest outside an urban sprawl, cloaked in Nithari technology that rendered it invisible and intangible to Earth's rudimentary detection systems. Lyra stepped onto the surface, the air immediately registering as warm and humid. The forest was alive with sounds, the trill of insects, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustling of unseen creatures in the underbrush. Her appearance was a calculated illusion, a holographic projection calibrated to blend with human norms. She wore simple, earth-toned clothing, her features softened to match the aesthetic of the local population. Yet beneath the guise, she remained distinctly Nithari, her senses heightened, her reflexes sharper than any human could fathom. The city loomed ahead, a labyrinth of lights and noise. Lyra's steps were deliberate as she entered, her presence unnoticed by the bustling crowd. Humans moved with purpose, yet seemed perpetually distracted, their thoughts scattered, their expressions ranging from weary to elated. She observed them with clinical detachment, cataloging gestures and interactions, but there was something about the scene that unsettled her. A child cried out in frustration as her balloon escaped into the night sky. A vendor argued heatedly with a customer over a handful of worn bills. A street artist painted a swirling mural on a crumbling wall, his face illuminated by the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. It was chaos, yet there was an order to it, a rhythm Lyra could not yet grasp. She paused by the artist, watching as he added a final stroke to his work. The mural was abstract but powerful, a riot of colors and shapes that seemed to convey both pain and hope. The artist turned, catching her gaze. "You like it?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. Lyra hesitated. "It is unexpected," she replied, her voice carefully modulated to sound human. "Life's like that," he said with a shrug, wiping his hands on his paint-streaked pants. Unexpected. The word lingered in her thoughts as she moved on, her focus shifting back to the anomaly she had detected earlier. It was growing stronger now, a faint ripple in the fabric of Earth's energy. She followed it through the maze of streets, her pace quickening. It led her to a darkened alley, where the air felt heavier, charged with an unnatural tension. Lyra's senses sharpened as she stepped forward, her holographic disguise shimmering faintly in the dim light. At the alley's end was a figure, human in shape, but exuding an energy that was unmistakably alien. For the first time, Lyra felt a flicker of unease. This mission, she realized, was going to be far more complicated than she had anticipated. The air in the alley was thick, as if charged with a silent current. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the cracked walls, distorting the space around Lyra. She stepped closer, her movements calculated, her holographic guise flickering faintly in the dim light. The figure at the end of the alley remained still, its presence more unsettling the closer she got. Though it appeared human in form, the energy radiating from it told a different story, a resonance that did not belong to this planet, nor to the Nithari. Lyra's pulse quickened, though her expression remained neutral. With a subtle movement of her hand, she activated the neural interface embedded beneath her skin, sending a silent command to the Arcosine. Within seconds, her ship began feeding her real-time data, atmospheric readings, spatial distortions, and traces of unfamiliar radiation emanating from the figure before her. Analysis incomplete, the ship's voice whispered in her mind. Energy signature unrecognized. Recommend retreat. Retreat? Lyra frowned at the suggestion. Diplomacy demanded understanding, not evasion, but the ship's caution was not unwarranted. This was no ordinary anomaly. Still, she held her ground, watching as the figure finally moved, its head tilted as if studying her in return. Then, in a voice that seemed to echo unnaturally, it spoke. "You don't belong here." The words were simple, but the tone carried an unsettling weight, as though the statement was less an observation and more a judgment. Lyra didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice calm and deliberate. "Neither do you." The figure tilted its head further, the motion almost mechanical. Its eyes, dark and fathomless, seemed to pull at her focus, as if they were gateways to something vast and incomprehensible. The faint hum of energy around it grew sharper, more oppressive. "Leave," it said, the single word slicing through the air like a command. Lyra hesitated. It was not fear that made her pause, but a calculation of risk. Her mandate forbade direct confrontation unless absolutely necessary, and this encounter was already bordering on the unpredictable. Yet the ripple in Earth's energy, the anomaly that had led her here, was undoubtedly tied to this being. To retreat now would be to leave questions unanswered, mysteries unsolved. She took another step forward. "I cannot," she replied. Her voice was steady, but her senses were on high alert. "I have questions, and you have answers." The figure's form began to shift, its edges blurring, as though it were shedding the human guise it wore. The air around it vibrated, and Lyra felt the weight of its energy pressing against her own. For a fleeting moment, she glimpsed its true shape, a distortion of light and shadow, neither solid nor entirely real. Then it was gone, dissolving into the air as though it had never been there. Lyra stood in the alley for a long moment, her mind racing through possibilities. The being's sudden disappearance was not a retreat. It felt more like a warning or perhaps a test. She exhaled slowly, her neural interface still humming with data from the encounter. The ship's voice broke her concentration. Energy signature dissipated, no traces remaining. Lyra narrowed her eyes. "It was not a coincidence," she murmured. "Something is watching this planet, something beyond human comprehension." She left the alley, her steps brisk but measured. The city's noise enveloped her again, the hum of humanity a stark contrast to the eerie silence of the encounter. Lyra moved through the crowd, her holographic projection rendering her indistinguishable from the humans around her. Yet she felt exposed, her presence on Earth suddenly more precarious. Later that night, Lyra found herself in a small cafe tucked away from the main streets. The dimly lit space was nearly empty, save for a few patrons engrossed in their own worlds. She chose a seat in the corner, her back to the wall, and activated a small device disguised as a bracelet on her wrist. A faint, holographic screen appeared, displaying the data she had gathered since her arrival. The anomaly's readings pulsed faintly on the screen, their patterns irregular but persistent. It was as if the energy was alive, shifting and adapting in response to her presence. She frowned, her mind running through the possibilities. Was the being she encountered part of a larger force, or was it acting alone, a rogue entity with its own agenda? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. She looked up to see Claire, the journalist she had met earlier, taking a seat across from her. Lyra hadn't expected to see her again so soon, but she quickly adjusted her demeanor, masking her surprise. "I thought I might find you here," Claire said, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. You left the rally earlier without a word. Lyra offered a faint smile. I had something to attend to. Claire studied her for a moment, then leaned in slightly. You're not just passing through, are you? There's something about you, something different. Lyra's mind raced. Claire's intuition was both a testament to human perceptiveness and an inconvenience. She needed to deflect the journalist's curiosity without raising further suspicion. I'm here to observe, Lyra said, choosing her words carefully. This place, it's fascinating. Claire raised an eyebrow. Fascinating. That's not a word most people would use for this city. Lyra didn't respond immediately. Instead, she glanced at the holographic screen still active on her wrist, its display hidden from Claire's view. The anomaly's readings had shifted again, their pattern growing more erratic. Whatever force was at play, it was far from over. The night deepened, and Lyra left the cafe, her thoughts heavy with unanswered questions. As she walked through the quiet streets, the faint ripple in the planet's energy returned, stronger now, more insistent. She followed it instinctively, her senses on high alert. It led her to the edge of the city, where the urban sprawl gave way to an industrial district. The air was thick with the smell of metal and oil, the hum of machinery echoing through the darkness. Lyra moved silently, her holographic projection flickering faintly in the low light. She reached a large, abandoned warehouse, its windows shattered and its walls covered in graffiti. The ripple in the energy was strongest here, pulsing like a heartbeat. Lyra stepped inside, the shadows swallowing her as she moved deeper into the space. In the center of the warehouse, she found a device, alien in design, its surface smooth and reflective, its structure pulsing with an unnatural light. Lyra's breath caught. This was no human creation. It was a beacon, broadcasting a signal into the void. Before she could react, the device emitted a high-pitched tone, and the warehouse filled with a blinding light. Lyra shielded her eyes, her mind racing as the energy around her surged. She was no longer alone. The light was oppressive, pressing against Lyra's senses, like an ocean tide threatening to pull her under. Her neural interface strained against the intensity, attempting to process the surging data streams pouring from the alien beacon. The air around her vibrated with an energy that felt alive, chaotic, and invasive, a stark contrast to the harmonious rhythms of Nethari technology. She raised a hand, activating the dampening field woven into her suit's projection layer. The field dimmed the light slightly, enough for her to make out the beacon's structure. It was a strange amalgamation of smooth organic curves and sharp angular protrusions, as though it had been designed by two minds working at odds. The pulse of its signal resonated deep within her, vibrating on frequencies that hinted at something vast and distant. Her instincts screamed to destroy it. Whatever this device was broadcasting, it was not meant for human understanding. It carried with it the weight of something dangerous, something that could unravel this fragile world. But as Lyra stepped closer, her every movement measured, she realized she needed more than destruction. She needed answers. A sound broke through the hum of the beacon, low and guttural. Lyra froze. From the far corner of the warehouse, a figure emerged, its silhouette cutting against the lingering brightness. It was humanoid but taller than most humans, its movements unnaturally fluid. Its skin, if it could be called that, shimmered with an iridescent quality, and its eyes glowed faintly like distant stars. The being regarded her with an intensity that sent a shiver through her. This was no projection or holographic disguise. This was real, and it was alien. I wondered who would come, the being said, its voice resonant and layered, as though multiple tones overlapped in a discordant harmony. Lyra's neural interface sparked with a cascade of alerts, struggling to analyze the creature's energy signature. It was unlike anything she had encountered, a blend of biological and technological life, as though it straddled the line between the organic and the synthetic. She straightened, her voice calm but edged with authority. You are not of this world. The being tilted its head, a faint smirk curving its lips. Neither are you. The words hit her like a blow. Her disguise was flawless, her presence carefully concealed, yet this creature had seen through it effortlessly. Lyra's mind raced, weighing her options. Engage? Retreat? You tamper with a fragile species, she said, deflecting. This device, it's not meant for them. They are not as fragile as you think, the being replied. Its gaze flicked toward the beacon, its glow intensifying as if responding to its creator's presence. The signal is not for them. It is for us, those who understand the deeper currents of existence. Lyra stepped closer, her body tense but outwardly composed. You risk their annihilation by bringing attention here. The galaxy is not kind to worlds like this. The being's expression shifted, its smirk fading into something unreadable. Kindness has never shaped the galaxy. Chaos does. Destruction does. And from it, new order rises. The words resonated uncomfortably with Lyra. The Nithari viewed themselves as the custodians of balance, intervening only to preserve harmony among worlds. But there had always been those who argued otherwise. Those who believed in reshaping the galaxy through upheaval, through conflict. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice firmer now. "I am many things," the being replied, its form flickering for a brief moment. "An emissary, a catalyst, a harbinger." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Lyra's neural interface pulsed urgently, its alerts growing more insistent. "Your beacon calls others," she said, piecing it together. "It's a lure." The being's smile returned, faint but knowing. Not a lure, a test, to see who is ready to rise and who will fall. Lyra's hand moved instinctively, activating a containment field around the beacon. A translucent barrier snapped into place, its energy shimmering like a fragile veil. The beacon's pulse faltered, its signal dampened but not entirely silenced. The being's expression darkened. "You meddle in things you do not understand." "I understand enough," Lyra replied. "This planet is under my protection. Whatever game you're playing, it ends here." The being stepped forward, its movement slow but deliberate. "You misunderstand, Nithari. This is not a game. It is inevitability." Before Lyra could respond, the beacon surged, its light piercing through the containment field. The pulse of energy that followed knocked her back, sending her sprawling across the warehouse floor. Her projection flickered, revealing flashes of her true form, a sleek, luminous figure with violet-toned skin and sharp, angular features. The being's eyes widened slightly, a glimmer of recognition crossing its face. "So," it murmured, "the Nithari still interfere after all these cycles. Perhaps there is hope yet." Lyra pushed herself to her feet, her body aching from the impact. "Explain yourself," she demanded, her voice sharp, but the being merely smiled, its form beginning to dissolve into the same iridescent light that surrounded the beacon. "Your questions will be answered, Nithari, but not by me." As the last traces of the being vanished, the warehouse fell silent. The beacon remained, its glow now faint but persistent. Lyra approached it cautiously, her neural interface analyzing the remnants of the signal. What she found chilled her. The signal was not just a call, it was a map, a set of coordinates broadcast into the depths of space, pointing to Earth like a beacon in the dark. And something was answering. Back on the Arco sign, Lyra paced the observation deck, her mind racing. The ship's systems worked furiously to decode the signal's contents, but the larger question loomed: who, or what, was responding? "Incoming transmission," the ship's voice interrupted, its tone unusually tense. Lyra froze. "From where?" "Unknown origin," the ship replied, signal strength increasing, source approaching. She turned to the viewport, her eyes scanning the star-specked void. At first, there was nothing, only the familiar stillness of space. Then a faint glimmer appeared, growing brighter with each passing second. A ship, massive, angular, and unmistakably alien. Lyra's breath caught. The stakes had just risen, and Earth was no longer merely under observation. It was under siege. The alien vessel loomed on the horizon of space like a predator, closing in on unsuspecting prey. Its angular design seemed to cut through the void, its dark surface pulsing faintly with veins of crimson light. Lyra stood on the Arcosign's command deck, her usually steady hands resting uneasily on the control interface. The data streaming across her neural interface painted a picture of foreboding clarity. The ship was an emissary of chaos, and it was responding to the beacon's call. "Status report," Lyra said, her voice measured but taut. "Approaching vessel remains unresponsive to standard hails," the Arcosign intoned. "Energy signatures indicate advanced weaponry, hostile intent, 87% probability." Lyra exhaled slowly, her mind racing. Every instinct she possessed screamed for intervention, for action. But her mandate loomed like an iron chain around her decisions. The Nithari Council had sent her to observe, not to interfere. Earth's fate, they argued, was not hers to control. Yet as the alien ship grew larger in the viewport, its presence radiating an unmistakable menace, Lyra felt the fragile threads of her detachment unraveling. This was no ordinary anomaly. This was an incursion. On the surface, the city moved with its usual restless energy, its inhabitants oblivious to the shadow stretching across their skies. Lyra's holographic projection wove through the crowds, her senses hyper-attuned to the escalating pulse of the beacon. It was drawing her back, its call insistent and unyielding. She stopped at a nondescript intersection, her gaze drawn upward. The faint shimmer of the alien vessel's atmospheric entry was barely visible, but Lyra could feel its presence, like a storm gathering on the edge of her perception. Her neural interface whispered warnings of electromagnetic disruptions, seismic tremors, signs that the ship was preparing to land. "You feel it too, don't you?" The voice startled her. She turned sharply to find Claire standing nearby, her expression a mix of curiosity and unease. The journalist had been persistent, her intuition honed to a razor's edge. Lyra had underestimated her once. She wouldn't make the same mistake again. "Feel what?" Lyra asked, masking her tension with feigned ignorance. Claire gestured vaguely toward the horizon. "The air's different, heavier. Something's happening, and it's not just another earthquake or freak storm. You know what I'm talking about." For a moment, Lyra considered dismissing her, retreating into her carefully constructed persona. But the weight of the moment pressed against her, and for the first time, she wondered if she was wrong to bear the burden of truth alone. "It's not safe here," Lyra said finally, her tone soft but firm. "You should leave." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Leave? And miss the story of the century? Not a chance." The sharpness in her voice reminded Lyra of humanity's unyielding tenacity, a trait she had come to admire and fear. She opened her mouth to respond, but the ground beneath them shuddered violently, cutting her off. The warehouse was a maelstrom of energy when Lyra arrived. The beacon's light had intensified, its pulsing rhythm now erratic and frantic. The containment field she had deployed earlier flickered weakly, unable to withstand the beacon's growing power. Around its base, strange tendrils of energy writhed like living things, spreading across the floor and walls. She approached cautiously, her neural interface scanning for weaknesses. The data was incomprehensible, a chaotic swirl of signals that defied logical patterns. Lyra had encountered advanced technology across the galaxy, but this was something else. It was as if the beacon was alive, its purpose evolving beyond its original design. "You're too late." The voice came from the shadows, low and resonant. Lyra turned sharply to find the alien being from before stepping into the light, its iridescent form shimmering like liquid metal. This time, its presence felt heavier, more oppressive. The air around it crackled with latent energy, as though the very fabric of reality strained to contain it. "The ship is here," the being said, its gaze fixed on Lyra. "The signal has been answered, The cycle begins. What cycle? Lyra demanded, her voice sharp. What is this beacon? What are you trying to do? The being tilted its head, its expression almost pitying. You still don't understand. This world, these humans, they are a nexus of potential. Chaos and creation intertwined. We seek to catalyze their evolution. Lyra's breath caught. By destroying them? By testing them, the being corrected. Those who survive will ascend. Those who fail will be swept aside, as it has always been. The words ignited a spark of fury within her. The Nithari believed in guiding civilizations gently, allowing them to grow at their own pace. This being's philosophy was a perversion of that ideal, a cruel mockery of progress. Lyra's voice trembled with conviction. You have no right to decide their fate. And you do? The being countered, its tone mocking. You are an observer, Nithari, bound by your council's laws, or have you grown attached to these creatures? The accusation struck a nerve. Lyra had spent decades detached, maintaining the impartiality demanded by her role. But Earth had changed her. The humans' contradictions, their resilience, their capacity for both destruction and kindness, had stirred something in her she couldn't ignore. She stepped forward, her stance defiant. I will not let you destroy them. The being's smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. Then you will burn with them. The alien vessel descended over the city, its presence casting an ominous shadow. Lyra could feel the weight of its power, its weapons systems primed and ready. The beacon pulsed wildly, its signal now a deafening roar in her mind. Time was running out. Her neural interface presented her with a choice, one she had been dreading. The Arcosine systems had identified a way to disrupt the beacon, to sever its connection to the alien ship. But the process would overload the containment field, triggering an explosion powerful enough to level the city. Millions of lives hung in the balance. Lyra's hands trembled as she activated her communicator. Arcosine, prepare for a controlled detonation. The ship's voice was calm but questioning. This course of action will result in significant collateral damage. Are you certain? Lyra hesitated, her mind flooded with images of the people she had come to understand, their struggles, their hope, their endless capacity for survival. She clenched her fists, her voice breaking as she whispered, "There is no other way." As the ship began its preparations, Lyra turned to Claire, who had followed her despite her warnings. The journalist's eyes were wide with fear, but also determination. "You need to leave," Lyra said urgently. "Take as many people as you can and go." Claire hesitated. "What about you?" Lyra didn't answer. There was no time for explanations. She turned back to the beacon, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. The beacon's pulse grew louder, its energy reaching a critical point. Lyra closed her eyes, steeling herself for what was to come. She had always been an observer, but now, for the first time, she was something more. A protector. A sacrifice. The countdown began. The countdown echoed in Lyra's mind, each second a drumbeat heralding the edge of oblivion. The beacon, a pulsating nexus of chaos, flared brighter with every passing moment. Energy rippled outward, tangible waves distorting the air, threatening to consume everything around it. Above the city, the alien vessel loomed, its presence an unspoken threat, a silent predator waiting for the signal to strike. Her neural interface ticked down the seconds. 10, 9, 8. "Abort sequence," Lyra commanded suddenly, her voice slicing through the chaos. The Arcosine hesitated. "Request unclear. Initiating detonation sequence was deemed optimal." "Abort it now," she snapped, her tone brooking no argument. "There's another way." The ship complied, the countdown halting abruptly. The warehouse fell eerily silent, save for the beacon's unrelenting hum. Lyra's mind raced, weaving through possibilities she had previously dismissed. Destruction was not the answer. Not when the beacon was not merely a weapon, but a message. Its purpose was not to obliterate, but to test, to challenge humanity in ways even the Nethari would struggle to grasp. If she was going to stop this, she had to understand it fully. On the Arco sign, a flurry of data streamed across the holographic displays, fed by Lyra's commands. The ship worked tirelessly, analyzing the beacon's energy patterns and the vessel hovering ominously in the atmosphere. What emerged was a lattice of intricate connections, a map of intent, technology, and power. "This is not just a broadcast," Lyra murmured, pacing. Her hands moved through the projections, isolating fragments of data. "It's a symbiosis. The beacon isn't summoning the ship. It's feeding it." The realization struck her like a blow. The alien vessel wasn't a harbinger of external destruction. It was an amplifier of the beacon's chaos. The two were entwined, their relationship both parasitic and mutual. One could not be stopped without neutralizing the other. And yet, the faint traces of design in the beacon hinted at something older, deeper, a signature that seemed almost Nethari, but different. Lyra's mind churned. Could this be from a long-forgotten faction of her people, or worse, an echo of what they feared to become? Back on Earth, Claire found Lyra standing amidst the swirling chaos of the warehouse, the journalist's face a mixture of determination and panic. "What's happening? You said you'd stop this," Claire shouted over the deafening hum of the beacon. Lyra turned, her expression unreadable. "I need your help." "Help? What can I possibly do against that?" Claire gestured wildly to the beacon, her disbelief palpable. "You're human. You see things differently," Lyra said, her voice urgent but steady. "This beacon isn't meant for me. It's meant for you. Its design challenges your kind, not mine. I need to know, what does it mean to you? What do you feel?" Claire blinked, taken aback by the question. She hesitated, her eyes scanning the beacon's relentless pulsation. "It feels alive, like it's watching, waiting, like it wants something, but I can't figure out what." Lyra nodded slowly, her thoughts aligning. "That's it. It's seeking a response, not just from me, but from humanity. A test of will, of ingenuity, of—" She trailed off, realization dawning. "It's a mirror, Claire. It reflects what's given to it." Claire stared at her. "So what? You want me to talk to it?" "Not talk," Lyra said, her voice softening. "Decide. This is about choice, the essence of what it means to be human. Step forward. Let it know you're here." The moment Claire touched the beacon, its pulsations changed. The wild, erratic rhythm slowed, harmonizing into something almost melodic. The energy tendrils recoiled slightly, retreating toward the beacon's core. Lyra watched, her neural interface buzzing with data she couldn't parse. This was no longer about technology or logic. This was something beyond her realm of understanding. Claire stood motionless, her hand resting against the beacon's surface. Her eyes fluttered shut, and for a moment, it seemed as though she had been drawn into the beacon itself. The room grew unbearably still, the hum now a low vibration that seemed to resonate with the very ground beneath them. Then the beacon spoke, not with words, but with images. Visions flooded Claire's mind. Earth in flames, humanity scattering, rebuilding, rising. The alien vessel no longer a threat but a companion, sharing its knowledge. A galaxy fractured by war but stitched together by fragile alliances. And finally, Lyra, her face illuminated by twin suns, standing among humans and alien species alike, her expression a mix of pride and sorrow. The connection broke abruptly, leaving Claire gasping for air. Lyra caught her before she fell, steadying her. "What did you see?" Lyra asked urgently. Claire shook her head, struggling to find the words. "It's not just a test," she whispered. "It's potential. It's showing us what we could become, if we survive." The alien vessel, as if sensing the shift, began to withdraw. Its massive form receded into the atmosphere, its glow dimming as it rose. Lyra's neural interface confirmed it. The beacon's signal was fading, its purpose fulfilled. "Did we win?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. Lyra's gaze was distant, thoughtful. This wasn't about winning. It was about proving we could choose, that humanity could rise to meet the unknown, no matter the cost. In the weeks that followed, the world returned to its chaotic equilibrium. The alien vessel vanished into the depths of space, leaving no trace but an unspoken promise. Earth had been marked, not as prey, but as a potential ally. Lyra prepared her report to the Nithari Council, her words carefully chosen. She detailed humanity's resilience, their capacity for adaptation, and their unique ability to confront chaos with creativity and courage. She argued not just for their inclusion in the intergalactic alliance, but for their necessity. This species, she concluded, does not merely survive. They thrive in defiance of the odds. They may be the key to ensuring harmony in a galaxy perpetually on the brink. But as she sent the report, Lyra couldn't shake the lingering image from Claire's vision, herself, standing among humanity in a future still unwritten. She wondered if the test had not just been for Earth, but for her as well. Perhaps, she thought, the galaxy's greatest strength lay not in perfection, but in its imperfections. And perhaps she had more to learn from humanity than she had ever imagined. The Arco sign ascended into the void, leaving Earth behind but carrying its echoes. Lyra stared at the planet below, its lights flickering like stars, and smiled softly. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun.